Right, this recording is going to follow on from an orthographic drawing. It's going to be 1 point perspective based on the orthographic drawing of a tape measure that I've done, which I'll show you here. You don't need to have done the drawing necessarily, although it's useful if you have, but I'm going to use this as my kind of reference point. So if you have done it, you can maybe look at yours and see how that works out. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the front face of the object as the front face of my perspective, and we're going to see the right hand side flowing off in this direction to the right. So the first thing we've got to do with 1 point perspective is to plant our single vanishing point. Now I'm going to kind of make this up as I go along, as I tend to do. So I kind of, if I'm doing a drawing like this, I would think about where it's positioned on the page, think about where my vanishing point is probably going to be. But in order for you guys to get it the same, I'll do a bit of measurement. So I'm going to put my vanishing point over on the top right. I'm going to put the front corner of my object down, not in the center of the page, not too high up, not too low down, and I'll put some measurement on there for you in a second. So the first measurement is our vanishing point, which is 25 millimeters down on the right hand side of the page. Now this is 1 point perspective, so we're going to use this vanishing point as a single point over here. And to plant my line, I've kind of estimated where it's going to come to. I'll now draw that properly on my page for you guys to follow along. You will need a long ruler for this. I'm going to come in at 120, and again, to keep this simple so I can draw straight up and down the page, I'm going to do a line at the top and bottom and then draw a construction line. If you had a set square, this would be an ideal time to use your set square to position yourself in the right position for this. I'm saying I'm doing 1 point perspective. I'm looking at this now and thinking, actually, do you know what? I'm doing 2 point perspective. Right, this is 2 point perspective, and what I'll do is I'll do a similar position over here at 25 mil for my second perspective point. So that was 25 mil down, that was 25 mil down. This is 120 millimeters across and 120 millimeters across. That gives us our front corner of our tape measure, and I'm then going to come up by let's come up by 5 centimeters, 50 mil, and then we'll come up by 70 mil here, and that'll give us, it'll give us quite a strong perspective, but I'm okay with that. So we now go, if you remember if you've done perspective drawings with me before, you've got your object, the front corner, and then you're going to go to each of your 2 vanishing points. Let's call that VP1 and VP2. We are below our eye level line, which means that we're going to be looking slightly down on the object. And then the first thing I do from each of my 2 points, I'm going to give you a reminder of those measurements. That was 5 centimeters up, and that was 7 centimeters up. And we're now going to go from each of those 2 points using construction lines. So these are light ones. I'm drawing them darker than I normally would so that you can see them. Be really precise with how you arrive at your vanishing points. You've got them there for a reason, so make sure you go to those. You can see why you would need a long ruler for this. Okay, and again I'm going darker than I would probably like to, but that's so that you can see what we're drawing. Okay, now if you look at the object that we're going to construct, we're going to draw this side here. We're going to try and do this little tongue of tape coming out, and we're going to try and do this button on the front of it. Now, I've said to you before, you can't measure in perspective, so what we will do is we'll go proportionally. If I went here 70, so for example, I know on the drawing that that's 70, that would probably look okay in this case. You might want to shorten it a little bit. I think I'm going to come to 60 so it doesn't get too big. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to do lots of talk of parallel lines. If you remember, if you've got two lines that are next to each other, they should never meet. The angle should be the same. It doesn't really matter what angle they're at. In our case, because of the object we're drawing, a lot of the time ours are going to be vertical. So if I say to you things like vertical, stay vertical, that's what I mean in this case. So our front corner is vertical and our back corner is going to be vertical or parallel with our front corner in this case. Right, so a reminder, I've come in at 60. Now, if you're doing your own drawing, you could maybe adapt that a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my front face. Now, if I did that at 25, that probably looks about right actually. So I'm coming off this front corner here, I'm coming back 25, and I'm going to go straight up, parallel with this corner, parallel with that one. Okay, now again, the trick that I've shown you before, if you put your pencil on top of your line you're going parallel with, get your ruler parallel with it, then you can pick your pencil up and draw your line. Okay, that looks pretty good actually. And that now means that we've got the front face, we've got the side face, or if it was our orthographic drawing, that was the front and that was the side elevation. So that would be the front, that would be the side. It doesn't really matter, it's just what we call them. So I'm now able to do the top, and the top is going to go from each of the 2 points, we go to our opposite vanishing point. Okay. Again, make sure I'm lined up nice and neatly with my vanishing point. Now I'm showing you this so that you know how to construct a 2-point perspective drawing. Now in reality, we want you to get sketching in 2-point perspective as well, and all these lines and all these measurements that I'm giving you are just a way of getting you going. You don't necessarily always have to do all this measuring, although that's part of the pleasure of it really. So again, if we look at our object, that was we called that the front, and this was our side elevation. I've got a curve on there, I'll put that in later on. But if I was dividing space, I would say that's my middle, that's my quarter, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So if you look at how I divide space later on, that's where that comes to, which will make sense in a bit. So I'm just thinking now what I need to draw next is going to be this slot in the front where the button comes. So we'll plant that in there. Now what I'm going to do, I could measure this and I could start kind of dividing bits up. And I'm thinking it's almost easy to do. If I came in 5 and came in 5, that would give me a nice wide slot. But what I'm actually going to do, I'm going to use the perspective dividing space technique and go corner to corner in my object, corner to corner. That tells me where my middle is, and so I'm going to do the center line. Now again, on the orthographic drawing we've done a center line, I'm going to do a center here. Okay, and then I'm going to divide space again to create this slot, and it gets a little bit complicated in some ways, but we're just doing exactly the same thing a number of times. So let's do inside this rectangle, that was my middle line here, that's my outer edge, so we're going to go from corner to corner in this section and corner to corner there. And the bit that I actually want is only where it crosses the other line. We actually only wanted that point there. Let's do the same thing again here. So cross there, and cross there. And the bit that we want is here. Okay, so I've got that section there, and they're going to form the left and right hand side of my slot. Okay, so I'm now going to go vertically up because my slot was vertical. vertically up there, and vertically up here. So I'm using my parallel kind of technique. I'm making sure I'm parallel with my center line and parallel with my outer edge. Okay, now look at that, there's loads of lines there, but actually we've only got a couple of important lines, which are our vertical ones. So there's my outer edge, there's my middle bit, the left hand edge of my slot, there's the right hand edge of my slot, there's the front face. And if you look at, if I measured this, again when I'm talking to you about perspective, this one comes in at about 4 mil, this one comes in at about 6.5 mil, 6.5 mil, and that's because as things get further away in perspective, they get narrower. So if that gap looks a little bit narrower to you than that one, then that's absolutely correct. Right, now to make this kind of make sense, what we'll do is we'll turn that slot into a rectangle, and I'm going to just estimate this. Okay, that looks about right for me. If you want to measure that down that line, that's 15 millimeters down that right hand side of the slot, and we're going to come up by the same, no, we're going to come up, yeah, we're going to come up 20 from the bottom on that same line. So that one was 15 mil, 1.5 centimeters. That one was 20 mil from the bottom. And now I go to VP1, to my left hand vanishing point. Okay. Now I don't need to go all the way there. I will go all the way there so you can see it, but I actually only really need it within my object to create this slot. Right, so I'm just focusing inside that object. Right, now my slot, to be honest, I think it's a little bit, I've made it a little bit short, but I'm going to stick with that because we've done that much of the drawing. Sometimes if I'm doing a perspective drawing like this, I would sketch it first of all and kind of get my proportions about right before I start measuring it. But that relies on you being able to sketch it, doesn't it? So, again, if I just refer you to this drawing, what we're showing is this slot here. Here, we're going to have this sort of tongue bit coming out the front, which is going to be about halfway down here. And that's going to be the tape part of it. So I'm going to draw that as a little rectangle first of all. So that's what we'll do next. Now I'm going to think about this button afterwards. Let's just get the main body done. So let's estimate where this is coming to. I'm going to come up that same line that we used for the end of our slot. I'm going to come up 10 because we've got that line there already. Now because our tape is a little bit wider than the slot, I'm going to use that 10 just because we had the line there, but I'm going to project through it a little bit. So there's my dot. I'm actually going to come deliberately a bit wider than my slot here and draw that as a line. Okay, that goes off to that vanishing point. So this is going to be where the tape comes out. I haven't measured on it, I just needed a construction line, and again I've drawn it quite dark so that you can see it as construction lines, but in reality the lighter you can draw these the better. Now all we're going to do, we're going to estimate, I think I'm going to end up with too many measurements if I do too much measuring with you, so I'm going to estimate about halfway between these lines and just make a mark and say that's the edge of the tape. Okay, now again, if you're a purist in perspective, that's not the best way of doing it, but I think to save people's brains with too much measuring, I think that's how we're going to go. And what we're going to do, we're going to project forward from VP2 out, and we're going to come out of each of these 2 points out of there to do our tongue, I keep calling it. It's a bit of tape, isn't it? Tape measure, tape. So let's do that. So I get it onto my VP2, I rotate it around until I meet that mark there. Double check that I'm lined up, and I'm going to project forward. I'm not measuring it, I'm just bashing it out forwards. And here, there's my vanishing point. There's the point that I'm coming out of. So line it up. Double check it and push forward. Okay, so then I'm going to give this a tiny bit of thickness for visual effect, because of course in as a tape it's really thin. I'm just going to give it a little line down there, and I'm also going to chop it off at a certain point, and I think I'll do that before we go too far. So let's come down this line here. And I think to make it look good, we'll come out 4 centimeters. Okay, so that is from there 4 centimeters, 40 mil. Okay, now I've got to go to this vanishing point over here to VP1 from that 40 mil, and it's only the end of the tape. So I don't need to go all the way back. I'll go a little bit further for you guys, but you don't need to. Okay, so there's the end of the tape. You can see that extreme perspective beginning to happen now as we converge, and that's because I'm fitting this all onto an A4 piece of paper. If you're lucky enough, like me, to have a nice big drawing surface, you could actually use a bit of masking tape off to the left and right and have your vanishing points miles away from each other. But I quite like this extreme perspective. I think it looks quite nice. Right, now again, if you look at that tape, we've got a 90-degree turn on it. So let's put a little 90-degree turn down here on that. So all I'm going to do for that, making sure I'm parallel with that line, making sure I'm parallel with this line, so my verticals remain vertical, for say what I always say, and I'm going to come down from that mark by 1 centimeter, 10 mil. Okay, and then from there I go to that same vanishing point. Okay, so that line there goes to that vanishing point. I'm trying not to draw them all the way. Can if you want. I just want to try and limit it a little bit. All right, so to get that 90-degree bend there on the back, what we do, we come down from that one, parallel with that one. Okay, we find this corner, and we're going to come straight down from there. Okay, now again, this is actually an object which has got a step in it. So we've done the front edge, but we've got to kind of build up a little step, and we've got to think about how we do that creatively. What I'm going to do, be a little bit creative with this, I'm going to literally just bash it up a little bit on the top. Now, if you want a measurement, that is 2 mil. I'm going to find my way down from that point to the vanishing point. Okay, and plot it there. That's too big, isn't it? I'm looking at that thinking that's too big, but do you know what? It will be absolutely fine, because what we'll do is we'll use that for the thickness of the tape as well. Right, so our turn is actually here. So if you look at the front of the tape, it's there. All right, now we're going to just do it rectangularly to keep it simple. So I've come up a little bit from that front corner. I'm now going to head off to that vanishing point with some construction lines. I'm not going to go onto the body of the tape measure itself. I'm just going to do them roughly to get them in position, roughly but still accurately to the vanishing point. Okay, and I'm always very tempted to go a bit sketchy with this, but I know if you guys are following on, it's better if we have measurements. So I am going to measure that, and I'm going to come back 10 mil. So along that front corner there, I'm coming back 10. And I'm going to go to the vanishing point as ever, but I only need it here. So now if I just darken that over by hand a second, you'll see where I'm going with this. If you're really good at drawing straight lines, you can darken it over by hand, but if you're not really good at drawing straight lines, use a ruler. Don't spoil a drawing by being a bit casual. Right, so again, look, I've got no thickness on this at the moment on my drawing, so I'm going to give it a bit of width. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to just come down a bit. It will work out absolutely fine. Okay, so this is the thickness of our metal tab. Okay, and now that I've got that on, I'm going to use that to create the top surface of my tape emerging from the body. Okay, so I'm using, I think I've said on my last video, I'm using equipment that's got glue on it and all sorts. The better care you take of your rulers and stuff, the better you can do these sorts of drawings. Alright, so there's my tape coming out of the body of the tape measure. Is tape really that thick? No. Does it matter? No, not in this case. Perspective isn't measured, and it's often used to enhance a drawing, to present an idea. If you're trying to fool someone and say something's there that isn't there, then you're doing the wrong thing. But if you're being a bit creative with how it looks and you're exaggerating things for effect, then there's not really a massive problem with that. So let's look at where we are at the moment. We've got this front slot drawn on. We've got the tape now sticking out. We've got the step on it. Well, I don't know if you've got the step on it. If you've just got a bend, that'll do. We'll draw this button, and then we'll talk about doing this radius at the back, because I think that's going to be a bit of a killer. So let's draw the button, the slider. All right, now this is a slot, and in perspective, what you didn't see on the orthographic drawing is the depth in this slot. If you look on the real object, there is a depth here and here. Now I'm not going to do it in total reality because we haven't got all day for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle on this slot. That's going to be our button. I'm not going to try and make it exactly the same as our orthographic because I've made my slot a bit short and I'm not going to change it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to estimate where I want our button to come. And we'll have it about in the middle. So what we'll do, we'll measure down the slot and we'll measure up the slot. And I think the best way to do this is to come down 10 mil. And then we'll come up 10 mil. Okay, up 10 mil, down 10 mil. Now our button is a little bit wider than our slot, so I'm actually going to use my projection from each of those 2 points. I'm going to go a little bit past it and a little bit forward of it. You'll see what I mean in a second. And these are construction lines, these are lights. And that's from each of those 2 marks, a little bit past in each direction. I'm going to do the top one as a full line. So look, I've come out a bit. Okay, now I'm being creative with this. Again, if your measurements aren't exactly mine, it doesn't really matter. What I'm doing is I'm doing the back of the button and I'm going to come forward a little bit, which is why I haven't drawn this as a solid line at the base. So I'm going to use that measurement there and that measurement there. I'm going to plot forward a bit. Now again, I'm going to just guess it at about 2 millimeters from this vanishing point through that dot, about 2 millimeters. So make sure I'm on that vanishing point. So I'm coming through a bit. Is that 2 mil? No, it's probably more like 3 millimeters. This is the one that's going to define the rest of my object. So from that vanishing point, through that dot, out a couple of mil. Once I've decided how long that is, I'm going to go off to the vanishing point over here. This is the point where I'm going to lose people, I know it is. Right, all you got to do is think we're making lots of boxes, one after the other, and we're plotting either back to our vanishing point or through our vanishing points. And providing you're doing that, if it comes out slightly differently, not to worry. So I'm coming forward, through that dot, out forward by a couple of mil. Once I've decided on that, I then go back to that vanishing point. And that means now we're coming from here, from there, through that one, until we meet that line. From there, through that dot, until we meet that line. Good, right. So that protrudes, it comes out slightly past this surface, which is great. It's going to make it look better. Right. Now I've got, that's where my other bits of my button are. Okay. So I know where my bottom corner is going to be. From there, out through there. So I'm going to just draw a little construction line. Coming out through here, from there. I'm going to draw the back edge of the button by joining those 2 up. Okay, there's the top of the button, here's the side of the button, and now I'm going to go parallel with that one from this corner straight down until I meet my next line. From that, straight down. Okay, so there's my side. Now I'm going to quickly shade that in so you can make sure you can see what I'm talking about all the time. That is the side of my button. Right. Now there's loads of lines there, I know that, but all you've got to do is maybe zoom in a little bit to see what I'm talking about, maybe enlarge your view at that point. But these are all known measurements, so I now know where the front of the button's going to come, and it's where this one crosses with, get my other ruler, that one crosses with that one. This one's vertical, this one's going off to the vanishing point, and where those 2 meet is going to be the front of the button. Alright, hopefully you can see that. Let's do it. So from here to that vanishing point. Push it out. I don't need it to go all the way up there, so I've just drawn my line a bit, and then it comes from here. So I'm parallel this time, that's my guide. I'm not going to vanishing point, so I'm parallel here with this front corner. Alright, now let me just darken in the bottom of that button here, because that's going to be a keeper. Now some of you who've done the orthographic drawing will be going, hang on, there's a chamfer there. I think for the sake of this, I think we're going to get too complicated if we do that. And if you're confident doing it, brilliant, draw your chamfer on. All you would do is choose your corners and then do a line to the vanishing point from each of those corners and then chop the corner off there. But I think for the majority of us, let's keep it like this. So look at that, that's beginning to look really cool. I'm going to draw the interior of this slot a little bit. I'm not going to do it really accurately because again there'd be lots of detail in there, but for what we're doing, all I'm going to do is a line parallel with this bit of the slot here. I'm not going to run it through the button because I think that would get confusing. So I'm going to go parallel. With that edge there and with that edge there. And I'm stepping it back a couple of millimeters. There's one of my vague measurements again. About 2 to 3 millimeters. Any bigger than that and you'd expect to see some more detail. So check your parallel, nice sharp pencil, and there and there. Okay, so we're nearly right with this. That's the inside wall, so if you were looking at that, that would be, depending on what you're looking at, either that bit or that bit. As I say, we're not doing all the detail. So to make this look right, we need a bottom bit here, and that's governed by this corner, goes off to that vanishing point. Now that's where you could get creative if you really, really wanted to. I'm not going to, I'm going to follow the rules of perspective. There's my vanishing point, there's my corner. So it goes in there. Very short little line, but if that was looking wrong, if you got your angle wrong on that, it would look a bit weird. So do try and follow the perspective. And then that tells us from this vanishing point where the bottom of that tape measure is. Are you with me still? I wonder how many of you have managed to do this bit. It's all boxes, it's all perspective points. And if you get it wrong, there's nothing wrong with rubbing it out and starting again. Remember, the real trick to this is to draw your construction lines really lightly. Quite often you'll see me drawing a bit harder than I would like to, but that's so that you guys get to see what I'm doing. So there's the inside face. Now let me, again, you don't need to shade this. I'm going to just very quickly put a bit of shading in there so that you can see what I'm talking about. And hopefully that'll help it punch out of the drawing a little bit. So now, what we're going to do, again, if we look at our drawing here, we've drawn the button, we've drawn the slot, we've drawn the tongue with the little clip. The only thing that we've really got to do now to make this look half decent is to put this curve on the back. And we're going to divide space again, which is quite a useful thing to do anyway. All right. So we're going to use this front edge here. We use this front edge here, and let me just draw that front corner of the tape measure in a bit better. Okay, and we're going to divide it in half. I only really want to know where the back half is, so I'm actually going to save us some lines by only going part way. He says drawing it all the way. Couldn't help myself. And again, this is from corner to corner. This time I'm only going to go part way. Alright, so I didn't draw the line all the way across, I only did it here. This one I had gone all the way across, but I could have only, if I'd stopped myself, could have only just gone in that middle, because I only want this bit. So to find that middle bit now, what we do is we go vertically at this point. So this is one of those vertical to vertical moments, and that's going to tell me where my top corner is. Now again, I'm not going to do that all the way across, I only need to know where it is. I'm going to do it top and bottom. I'm going to just make sure I'm parallel here, because what I wanted, if you remember, right, if you look at this, this is where my corner starts. It's halfway and halfway again. So I'm going to find the middle of this back rectangle on the drawing here. And if you look, this is extreme perspective. That is halfway, but that one's way longer than that one. Doesn't matter. So look, that's now become my corner, and that's now become my corner. I'm going to go from this corner to that corner and find the middle. I'm going to go from this corner to that corner and find the middle. And that gives me my center point. So I was using those two as corners if you got lost there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that then tells me, if I go parallel with this one, that then tells me where my curve starts. Right, so that's where this curve begins. And it's the same radius. I'm going to cheat this next bit because I'm going to say, actually, I know where that starts. That is conveniently 10 mil. That's where my curve starts. Because it's an equal curve and there's very little difference front and back of it, I'm going to also choose 10 mil here for the bottom of my curve. If you see what I mean, that and that are going to be the same distance away from it if I'm looking straight on at it. So in perspective, there's not going to be a massive difference. All I'm going to do, I worked out that that was 10 mil by dividing space. So I've used that measurement again, and that's going to be our curve. Now, lots of ways of drawing perspective curves. I'm going to just literally do a curve that looks quite nice. I've balanced it up inside this corner. I could plot that in 1,000,001 different ways, but that'll do me. Okay. Now, how do we turn that into a 3D corner? That's our challenge. So if I say to you a tangent, right, if I've got a curve and I've got a line bouncing off the edge, that's my tangent. I'm going to do the same thing off this top edge here, going to this vanishing point, going to VP1. There, right, going off that way. So this whole corner is going to be removed. Now we need to know where that curve starts. Okay, so I'm going to just take this point here and plot it over there. So I'm taking that point, I've just plotted it back there, so that when I dip this back down a little bit, there's the front of my curve, there's the back of the curve. I'm just going to blend that in a touch. All right. And then darken in. It's hard to see really on this drawing, but that actually, I'll be removing some of this corner. So my point that I'm going to darken into is actually there. That's probably the next moment, isn't it, where I've lost a whole bunch of people who've gone, don't know what you're talking about, mate. So if I've done my 2 points that tell me where my curve begins and ends. I've plotted a curve that felt kind of nice. It was about equal between those two in this case. I've then drawn a tangent from my vanishing point, just touching the edge of that curve. And then I've drawn a similar point to my front where the curve starts here. I've used the perspective point to go back to that. And then, and then I've just kind of eyed it in a little bit and darkened that in. Right, now, when I was doing my orthographic drawing, I did quite a lot of curving of corners and edges. So all I'm going to do in perspective, that's literally all we're going to do. We're going to curve off to where our corners are. Just put a little gentle curve on. Nice sharp lines. I'm not going to do this one here. I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to leave that alone. And then I'm going to darken in where my curve ends. So now that I've drawn that curve in, I'm going to draw a straight line between that point and that point. between the beginning and end point of curves. And that stops us from being a very sharp box and turns us into quite a nice rounded object. Now when I do this line here, I'm going to stop it where my button comes out a little bit. There and there. That darkens that in. Bottom edge I'm going to stop when I get to the tape sticking out. I'm trying to decide whether we're going to draw the clip, how brave we're feeling. I think we will, I think we should. So just joining up between those curves. I'm going to leave that back one for a minute. I don't think the clip will touch it, but I'm going to leave it alone for a moment. That's looking pretty good already, isn't it? If you've managed to get that, then well done you. If you've managed to get anything like that, well done you. Remember, the whole point of this, apart from learning a method, which is useful, this is about getting you sketching in perspective. And if you can start drawing boxes even close to this, and you can start sketching those, then we're really winning at life. Right, so again, let's look at this clip. What we'll do is we'll use this, it's not quite accurate to my orthographic drawing, but we'll use this dividing space technique to give us the side of our clip. All right, I'm going to do this quite quickly. I reckon we've been going for 42 minutes. Youch. Right, here's our centre line. Do you remember we did corner to corner? That gives us our centre line. We then went from those corner to corner. That gave us our quarter. I'm going to do the same over here. From that middle line to this corner. And from that corner to that middle line gives us our centre. All right, so that basically divides it into 4 equal sections. Then I'm going to go parallel with my front edge. I'm going to draw lines parallel here to roughly tell us where the clip is going to be. Check that you're parallel, vertical, remains vertical. Didn't go all the way up there, you'll notice, because I don't need to. Okay, so there's my one edge and there's the other edge. And what we're going to do, we're going to turn this into a rectangle. I'm going to measure now from this top corner. I know my line doesn't go all the way up to that top corner, but I'm going to measure down from it onto my line. And I think we'll come from my top corner down, that's 15 mil. That's one of the measurements that we need. And I think we'll come down from that point 40 mil. Okay, they're my 2 measurements. So I'm only using that corner for a minute. So I came from that top corner down 15 millimeters, and from that point 40 millimeters. Then from each of those 2 marks we go off to VP2. I only need to keep it in this rectangle, so I only need to keep it in here if I want to. You could go all the way if you want, if you like your perspective lines, but I'm only going to do it in there. I'll just whiz them off the back so you can see where they would come to. Now I did that top one quite dark, this one I'm going to do a little bit lighter. So from each of those 2 points I've then gone off to the vanishing point. I need to finish that line. Actually need that point there. Right, now if you look at that clip, it's not a flat object, it comes out a bit. We're going to come off here using VP1, and we'll then curve it a bit and plot down to the bottom. Now I'm not going to do it totally accurately, so if you're a real purist and you want to diddle around with it, you can do. I'm doing it in quite a straightforward way just to get this angle on it. I'm not going to do that flare at the bottom, although it would look lovely. All I'm going to do, from each of these 2 points here on the top, I'm going to project forward a bit. Right, look at that, about 1 centimetre. I won't even need that. And the same from VP1 forward a bit. Okay, And then to give it this sort of thickness and curve here, I'm going to just make a decision. I don't want to go too big. I'm going to come forward 5. You can estimate it, I'm okay with that. Come forward 5. I'm going to plot back. Okay, so that's plotted back there. That gives me the top. Now I'm going to curve it over in a minute, but what I needed to do was to know where my line starts for that angled spring bit of it. It's not a rectangle really, is it? So what I'm now going to do is to connect each of those corners up to those bottom points. Okay, so each of those 2 points that I created there go to those bottom points. All right, now here's the creative bit. You're going to have to just wiggle it a little bit. I'm going to put a curve on the back there, and I'm going to do a similar curve on the front here. I'm cutting the corner off. Now I could do all sorts of information for you about how you do that really precisely. I don't really think it matters for this drawing. If you look at it though, what you should find is that one curve begins and ends where the other one begins and ends. So in theory, the curve should start and end at the same point. It should be a similar sort of curve, but I'm not too worried about that for a minute. And then I'm gonna just for completion of this, I'm gonna come down the back a bit, because this is a metal clip which is attached to an injection molded polymer casing. So I'm going to come down from this corner, and come down 1 centimetre. So from that corner down 1 centimetre, and then I'm going to go off to VP2 until I hit that curve. And stop it there. All right. So there's my curve, comes down here, that pushes off, and that's where it would be riveted and glued on and stuff. It's probably a little bit longer than that in reality, but I think for our drawing, I don't want to overcomplicate things. Now, for me, I'm not going to do any shading in or anything today on this. I might do a tutorial later on about how we apply colour to it. And I've just darkened in the back. I'm going to just darken in that side. And that side to make sure they stand off, and I'm going to just be, for a moment, I'm going to just be creative and add a curve on the bottom of mine, just for the sake of making it look a bit nicer. You don't need to. Right, now if you've managed to achieve that, then congratulations. That's quite a challenging 2 point perspective drawing. I don't know why I was saying 1 point perspective. 2 point perspective drawing. 2 point VP1, VP2. So we are looking, this is below our eye level line. Okay, so hopefully you've managed that, and really this is about sketching. I would probably, if this was me drawing on my own, I would be quite confident sketching something like that because I've practiced perspective drawing. And that's taken us quite a long time. You work really hard at it, but the reality is that for a designer or an architect or an engineer, quite often it's the quick sketches that communicate the information to other people that are the most important. And so because I've drawn in perspective, I'm confident sketching in perspective, and that means that I'm using the process without some of the precision. A lot of the time when I'm talking to you guys, I'm giving you a gazillion measurements, and it's tedious, but that's how you kind of get your method. And then once you're able to sketch in perspective, you can then use it as an underlay for other drawings and other beginning points. Or you might even redesign this using the perspective guides that you've given yourself already and say, look, I'm going to make it more ergonomic by putting a curve here, or I'm going to change that clip into something that's got less materials used. I might add a magnetic base to it. So you have your perspective drawing as the starting point for the next stage. But as I say, for me, this is all about getting you drawing in perspective and understanding how perspective viewpoints work. Okay, so well done if you've done it. Well done if you've attempted to do it and haven't quite made it. As long as you're getting better, then we're very happy. You could do some rubbing out if you want to. I quite like a drawing that's got its construction detail on it. So, well done.